Welcome to Did She Really Say That? The podcast for women who are done following the traditional business rules that don't serve us. I am your host, Katrina van Oudheusden, and in every episode, we break down what it really takes to scale your business as a woman. No burnout, no BS, no apologies. So if you're ready to discover how your natural female intelligence can become your biggest and most authentic advantage, grab your free guide at createherplanner.com/free. Now let's dive into today's episode. Well, welcome back to this episode of Did She Really Say That? And today we're going to have a raw, honest, truthful conversation, women. You know, part of the creator method is getting back into your own rhythm, getting back into your cycle. And one of the things we do as creators is that we forget that. We don't acknowledge that we as women build businesses differently, we live life differently, and the construct which we've been given doesn't always serve us. So that had me reach out and talk with Jen because I find this a fascinating conversation when we talk about what does it mean to build a business as a woman? Where do we lean on each other? Where does support show up for us? What actually is a community? And this is going to be an insightful and very personal conversation between the two of us about this because this is the conversation we're not having. We're trying to posture and be beautiful, and there are some ugly sides to what we're building. And so we're going to expose them a little bit here today. So, Jen, if you can just do a quick introduction of who you are and what you're up to in the world.
Sure. Jennifer Barrett Fajardo. I live in Honolulu, Hawaii, and I have been self-employed since 2012. And it was sort of a meandering path to entrepreneurship that I left a faculty position at the University of Hawaii, where I was running a lot of grant-funded programs, was on a track to lead a large nonprofit here in the islands, which I thought was, my lifelong dream and like the pinnacle of my career. And instead, I became a consultant. I built a boutique consultancy serving nonprofits, philanthropic enterprises, and community-minded businesses here in Hawaii and across the US.
And then where are you now? Like, what is your purpose and intention now for all of our listeners?
Sure. I'm in a kind of a weird transitory season of I was a caregiver for my husband. He was living with ALS for about 3 years from 21 to 24. And during that time, it became really difficult to continue doing the work I was doing at the time. And so I knew I needed to make a pivot. And given my experience, I like to call it entrepreneuring while caregiving. I made a pivot into more coaching and supporting and thought partnership of other women entrepreneurs. I looked around me and I saw a lot of folks in similar situations to myself, whether they were caregiving, they were going through their own health journey, and they could not show up for a 9 to 5 or traditional employment. And so, whether by necessity or by design, they made a leap or dipped their toe into entrepreneurial waters, and I wanted to support that through my experience. So I'm doing that work. That's newer work for me. And my husband passed in December of 24. I'm about a year out, a newish widow, rebuilding my life and business. And I'm also kind of leaning back into some of that consulting work. So I'm bridging both of those worlds and areas of work.
I love that. So let's get a little bit into this because we were having a conversation before we jumped on and hit the record button. I was like kicking myself. I'm like, this should be recorded. So because it is the honest truth. So there was something you said, you want to be known as a thought partner and a trusted advisor, less as a coach. So walk me through why that's important for you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I alluded to this last year for me has been interesting is the label I'll put on it. And I think a little bit of my struggle was that as I stepped back from my consulting work, and this is an indirect answer to your question, as I kind of was transitioning or trying to navigate that pivot from the consulting to the coaching, from working with institutions to working with individual women entrepreneurs and business builders, I fell into the trap of I'm shifting from being a consultant to a coach. And those are
Mm,
very different ways of approaching your work and working
yeah.
with clients. And I found that in some ways it was a natural transition because coaching was a natural part of my consulting work, something you would lean into. Um, but I found that my brain is naturally wants to fix and solve problems. And to
Ta-da!
me, we can define all these terms in different ways, but to me, a thought partner is someone who it can be any and all of those things, right?
Mm,
And so I think I personally thrive in the space of being more nimble in how I show up for the clients and my colleagues and the people I work with, and shifting between coaching, sort of eliciting, drawing out, the questions that help people dig deep and find their own truths or inner wisdom and knowledge and knowing and lived experience. And the consulting of like showing up with the solution or the theory or the framework or the tool or the tactic. And I have so many thoughts, so I'm hesitating because I don't want to take us too deep down another rabbit hole. But I think, especially having been in a lot of these online business spaces, a lot of us as women, especially, we show up and we are exhausted, overwhelmed, and we want a blueprint. And we want someone to just tell us what to do. And in some ways, I totally get that. I've been there. But what happens is we find the blueprint. We think, if I just follow this step by step, I'm going to get there. I'm going to build the business. The money's going to come. Life's going to be amazing. And somewhere along the way, we find that we've created a life, like we've created a job for ourselves that we're
yep.
unhappy or miserable or frustrated with. Things have not turned out the way we expected. So I am challenging myself to challenge
Mm,
my clients and the people I work with to make sure you're really actually reflecting on, does this make sense for me? And to be able to reflect on, what can I take from this blueprint or this coach or this expert that makes sense and resonates? And what can I leave behind?
yeah. And I think that is the power of this conversation that we're having right now, because that is one thing I learned really early on in life, because I was a former volleyball player, and during my 9 years of playing volleyball, I actually had several different coaches. Like I think I had 7 different coaches throughout my volleyball career. And one thing I do remember early on was, take what you need from that one coach and leave the rest behind. And that's always, I mean, I was probably taught that at like 16 years old, but that mantra has always served, because like you said, we are exhausted as women. I will totally agree with that. When I stepped into the online space, I wanted the blueprint. I followed the blueprint. I made the money, and I hated everything about it later on. Because to your point, Jen, it didn't serve, like it didn't feel aligned. And the thing that I even saw was that we were taking the same construct that we were trying to leave, that corporate environment, the system that was broken, and the only other tool that we were given was how that broken system was built as the blueprint, and said, well, this is the broken system that you just left, but here's the blueprint on how to build your own broken system. So for those of you guys that are listening, Jen's over here like nodding her head like, oh, hell yeah. Like that's
Yeah.
exactly what we're dealing with.
Something that I find myself saying, it's not quite a mantra, but something that I find myself saying over and over, particularly with women coaching clients, is, if you choose entrepreneurship or self-employment or freelancing or however you define it for yourself, if it isn't somehow making your life better,
Mm,
go get a job.
yep.
Because if you're unable to shape it and feel that you can influence it and create what you need and want in this moment, then you're either not ready for it or it's not for you. And at
Yeah.
least go get the predictability and reliability of a paycheck and your health insurance and all the rest of the things, rather than struggling with all of it. And
Yeah.
that's not meant to like shame anyone, but it can, there's this allure of, what self-employment or entrepreneurship or business building can offer us. And it really isn't for everybody, but sometimes you won't know until you try. And some of
Right.
us just get scared to take the
Yeah.
leap.
Yeah, and it is a scary leap. I remember when I did it, I just closed the door. I didn't burn the bridge, I closed the door, and I said, this part of my life, being a chef, is the door I close. But it doesn't mean the skill set and what I learned and the toolkit that I had from that experience I left behind. I didn't close the door on that. I just brought it in and made it look different. I brought it into a new environment, and I said, what works in here? What do I need to leave behind? So there's this tool bag that I think we bring as women, in either as caregivers, as mothers, that we have this extra tool bag of like taking care of the emotional support, taking care of a lot of different things. And we forget that we have this tool bag with us, that we have access to at any time, that we
Mm,
can kind of Swiss Army knife out
yes.
and use. And it doesn't always fit the norm of what we've been taught how things should look. And I think that's where you and I want to challenge women because we are creators. For the love of all, we birth humanity, right? Our
Yeah.
bodies literally go through a creation process every single month, right?
Yeah.
And yet we assume that we can't take what's broken and create it newly. There's the construct of it. I will say, like, a wheel is a wheel. You can make a prettier color, you can do stuff like that, but the wheel is the wheel. So you're not reinventing the wheel. But what I find when I work with women is that when we're given permission to rest between the work, when we're actually able to feel back into our bodies what's actually going on, there
Hmm.
is a mental shift that happens for us. Because you even mentioned it's like sometimes are so exhausted, we're so overthinking that we don't even know how to down, like to rest
Yeah.
as an integral part of our well-being. And so because every construct, every blueprint we're given is this, do this in 30 days, do this in 90 days, do this in 6 months, and da-da. And it's like, I call BS. I call bullshit. Totally.
Yes, and I have really struggled with that because I've always been like, an achiever, a dreamer, a think big, like lots of ideas and always chasing them. And that's been one of the biggest shifts for me that I've tried to become much more intentional
Mm,
in sort of I'm not big on like a word of the year and all that sort of things, but recently for 2026, what has come to me is the word steady. And
mm,
what's rooted and steady for me is pacing myself because I'm like a all in 100 miles an hour. The idea comes, everybody's got to know about it, do all the things. And I'm trying to learn to lean back and not give up or stop, but just pace myself in the year ahead. After, again, I think it was intensified for me in my caregiving experience because it was
yep,
such an intense and traumatic experience caring for someone who gets to the point where they literally rely on you for every activity of daily living,
yep.
to learn to slow down and not constantly be in this high vigilance alert state.
Yeah. It is a high stress and in learning to stop and learning to ask for help and learning like building a support system and a community does become critical. I think for women specifically, like we thrive in communities. And I don't mean communities where like there's a leader and everyone else follows. And that's something like what you've mentioned, Jen, in what you've been building. You've been building the easy please sisterhood, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And, when we were talking about what it is to build this, I think community has been, I'm going to say the word bastardized.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's been used in social media, it's like, oh, just build your community here, build your community here. But it's leader led. That's not community. That's influence and ego.
Yes, there's a place for various forms, but for me, and I think what you just described for women, for a lot of reasons that we could get
Mm,
into, but you've hinted at and named in some of the earlier part of our conversation. Many of us, by choice or by life circumstances, learn to be self-sufficient
hmm.
and do all the things, no matter how hard it is, no matter how impossible it is. Sometimes it's just easier to do things ourselves, and we shoulder the load no matter how crippling or overwhelming and heavy that load gets. And it becomes almost impossible for us to ask for help. And even
Yes.
when we do ask for help, I think the only thing harder than asking for help is actually accepting the help. And for me, that's what we've been trying to build in our community. And setting aside the community that I'm building, I think for women, we need to learn trust and be able to
Mm.
put our guard down and believe that there are other women who can truly put our best interests, take that to heart
Yes,
and allow
exactly.
us to kind of show our vulnerable sides and the less than perfect sides
Mm,
and not shame us for that.
mm.
But celebrate like all that we have done and lived and experienced and pushed through to get where we are now and still have the dream or the vision for the thing that we want next
Yeah.
for
I think it,
ourselves, for our families, for our communities.
yeah. I think what you point to is that we've been taught that everyone's going to stab us in the back.
Yeah.
And that is like we've been brought up in that competitive space. And I will say this, if you guys look back through history, especially here in the US and the within the realm where we're having this podcast, women have only been in the workplace since the 40s during World War II. And then we were told we couldn't work because the men needed the jobs. And then we fought our way back into it. And at a lot of the levels that we were wanting to get into as women, we were competing with each other. We were the only one or two women in those environments. And so we were mimicking or mirroring what the environment we were working in, which the men are they're assholes. Like typically they're competitive, they're striving, it's a one up. Like that's the environment in which they were raised in certain industries. Right. And so as a woman, when you're coming into that, the men are going to treat you as competition and the women are going to treat you as competition. So everybody is competition. And unfortunately, that mindset, when you look at the economic impact of that in the world today across the globe, we are finding that women don't stay in jobs where their voices are needed. And we're starting to shift this conversation of what does it look like to build relationships and collaboration instead of competition in the work environment? How do we support each other so that the best do rise and that we're all working together as teams? You're starting to see that call. And I think that what I'm looking at, Jen, when I talk to women, is we're the ones leading it.
Yeah. Yeah. I was joking to you before, we officially started that easy please. That phrase for me came out of one thing I didn't share with you. It came from my rejection of we can do hard things, because to me, that's what women do. We rise to the
Hmm.
occasion. We do hard things whether we want to or not. We figure it out. But also this sense of rejecting the need, like this is not a new concept, but rejecting hustle culture and this sense that somehow we're failing if we aren't in this constant, you use the word striving, like striving, struggling, achieving, that has to be, quote, hard work. And if it's not
Harder, especially
hard,
for
then we're
us.
failing,
Yeah, and
right?
it's got to be twice as hard for women. Like we have to struggle harder and more painfully.
Why? I'm very much like growth mindset. There's more than enough for everybody. If we can lean into, more reciprocal relationship with the world around us and the people in the same spaces that we're in. A recent friend in the online space said, it's not just that, gosh, I'm getting tongue tied, but she's like, we can bake more pie, right? We can bake more pie. Not just that we're not limited to this pie, but let's bake more. Let's make
Yeah,
more, that there's more than enough to go around.
yeah. And it's true. So easy please. Um, Sisterhood. So you talked a little bit about the name, like how it came down from like a rejection. What is it that you are designing and creating with this group of women? Because it really is one of when you were talking about and sharing it before we jumped on the podcast, it's not a one woman show. It is a collective share of knowledge. It's this space that you're creating for us to lean into and onto each other. And I think that's the beauty of what you're designing and creating.
That's the aspiration. And one thing that I didn't share with you that I'll share here that probably feels a little vulnerable and like the thing you're not supposed to say is that, well, in twofold. The first is less that it's I'm I think I'm trying to create the community that I wish I had when I first started working for myself, when I first started building something.
Yep.
A place to turn to be like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but I'm trying, right? And does anybody have an experience with this? Can you just like see, feel, and support me and tell me I'm not crazy? That it's all worth it, that I'm going to get to the other side of this, and be in community with women who are a step or two ahead of me, where I am, or even a step behind me. The thing that I probably shouldn't say is I was doing this at a time where life was incredibly hard and I was
Mm,
desperately trying to continue working. Yes, in part because I couldn't go without the income,
right.
but also as someone who had such intense caregiving responsibilities for my life partner and losing that relationship and not wanting my whole identity to be wrapped up in caregiving and um, partner to my husband at the time needed work. I needed a purpose outside of that. And so the community was something I felt I could do while juggling the caregiving role. And so the thing I'm not supposed to say is in part that it was sort of this desperate, what can I do and what do I need, but I know other women need. But in the beginning, I think also a lot of the women who joined, some of them believed in what I was building and they joined because they wanted to support me.
Hmm.
That's a good thing and a bad thing, right? Because we need people to show up in community. And if people just join to support me, it's a one and done, right? Okay, I joined the community and they may or may not actually show up. And so
Mm,
I am in a phase now that I have the bandwidth and I'm back sort of to more my whole self, the new version of Jen anyway, the other side of caregiving and losing my husband and all that, of how do we now continue to grow community where it needs to be bigger than Jen? Because
Mm,
the initial people are going to be the people who know you the most. They already trust you. So how do we go beyond that sort of inner circle or the folks
yep.
that already have a relationship with me to it not being about me for the reasons we talked about of I don't
Yep.
want it to be singularly Jen's voice, vision,
Right.
leadership. It has to be bigger than me.
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your question. I think I kind of meandered a bit there.
No, so for the audience that's listening, for audiences that's listening to this, just think about this for yourself, right? And I think this points to something that we innately feel as all women, the need to connect.
Yes.
Not just in the caregiving, not just in being a mother, not just being a wife, but actually as a woman. And I think that's kind of what you were pointing to. It's like, I just want to be known beyond this container that I'm in at this moment, the season that I'm in at this moment, because there's more to me than just this. And I think that's what I hear a lot of women. I'm getting chills talking about this. So I know I'm on the right space because this is where we want to be seen. And I think a lot of the times what we do as a caregiver and as a mom, it's the invisible work. I've actually heard the quote that women do the invisible work that make the world work. But that invisible work on us as women, whew, I'm getting emotional over here. Is the most taxing on us. It is the one that drains us the fastest. And when there is no one else to lean on, or we feel like we're doing this in a silo by ourselves, it feels even more overwhelming, right? And, for me, it was really interesting. There was a catalyst that, or a point that just happened recently last week. My father ended up in the hospital. My mother's at home recovering from surgery, so she's in a wheelchair, so she can't care for herself. And my father's in the hospital and can't take care of himself. And I just left to go on a committed contract where I couldn't be there. And all of a sudden, all my siblings, I'm a child of six, showed up. And the whole thing just came to like an explosion. So text is great, I will tell you all my listeners, but it is the worst communication platform in the world. Please call up, pick up the phone, have a voice-to-voice conversation. So I started calling all my siblings and just kind of saying, hey, I just spent 2 months at my parents' house. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I know. Having slept there, woke up there, this is what's going on. And what really was interesting in having those conversations with my brothers and sisters is that the next thing I know, I'm getting a phone call from my oldest brother, and he's like, hey, my wife and I are coming out. We can take care of them for the next 2 weeks until you come back, right? And it was in that moment that I realized too, is like sometimes you have to be willing to have those conversations and shed the light on that invisible work that you're doing,
Yes.
because that allows support to come in. And that gave me the sense that I could then focus in on what I'm working on during these weeks that I'm away, but still be able to come back and be there in that environment for my parents. So, that is probably a small piece of what you went through, Jen, but that was the moment. It's like, who can I reach out to? And I'm lucky enough I have five brothers and sisters to pick from. One was starting a little bit of um an angst, and the
Yes.
other ones of us were like, all right, like cool, how can we help mom and dad? So I think that's when you do look outside of yourself. It's like, because I'm more than just this moment in my life and this time period. And so when you talk about the easy please sisterhood, that resonates because sometimes we easily please everybody but ourselves,
Yes.
and we're looking for where can I lean on, where can I not be sold but be supported?
Yes.
Because I feel like
Yes.
there's so many communities that we go into, we want to be part of, and we're like, hey, I just have this one, and everyone's like, call me, I can help. Like, I don't need to be sold. I just need to be supported and lifted up and, given a little bit of maybe a step forward that doesn't feel like it's, overwhelming for where I'm at right now.
I mean, there's so many threads that you just woven together there, right? And I'm personally leaning into community in this moment. And this isn't about positioning my community or pitching my community, but
Right.
it is an invitation and encouragement to the women who are listening to find or create or join community, whatever that looks like. It could
Mm,
be family. could be chosen family, it can be work family, it can be however you define your circles, your networks, the people, the relationships that you can tap into or build and grow. We cannot do this alone. And we have to give ourselves permission to be vulnerable, and that it's not a failure to need help, want help, and to lean into like that was so beautiful, like seeing you reflecting on being able to let your siblings step in and step up
Yep.
so that you could return to your work, which is in a form, I'm imagining for you as a way that you're recharging, is being able to lean into your work in that moment. That doesn't make sense for everybody, right? They say, no, you need to stop working and you need to focus on family and all the rest. And quite frankly, that's sometimes not what we need. We
Yeah.
need to be able to step away from the most meaningful thing in our lives and our family and our relationships in order to do something to recenter ourselves so we can go back to those things too.
Yeah, because I think that also ties into that common thread that I hear, especially like empty nesters. And I hear talk with women, they said, I don't know who I am.
Yeah, it's a what I am surprised and not surprised by is there's a similar phenomenon with widows who, and especially caregivers who your life, not only have you lost your partner, but you've lost your partner after really having to lean into supporting them. Was in support groups. I had a peer mentor. I saw all of it. These women in many cases were a decade or two ahead of me. Sometimes were already retired or forced into retirement. And I thought, well, that's not going to be me. I see that train coming. I have a business. I'll just go back to that. And then you get to the other side. And as much as we feel we've prepared and we see it and we've researched, we've done all the things, we know all the things, we simply can't know how we will feel and who we will be when we get to the other side of these
Mm.
kind of punctuation marks in life, if you will. Yeah.
And I think that points back to what I'm also hearing, and even for myself, it's like I hit that point of burnout about 3 years ago. And I would say my recovery from that had been like a 2 year journey to coming back to what I'm designing and building today. Because I said, truthfully, I said, fuck it. Like there's no design for what I'm building. But I have the skills and resources to lean in to people to find out what I need. I'm not rebuilding a wheel. I'm just redesigning and massaging it for women, like just giving a different breathing space in there. And then how do I embody that for myself? So, never feel like you have to rush from one thing. Like one chapter closes, it doesn't mean the next one has to open that very second. I
Mm-hmm.
find as women, when we sit back and actually reflect on what is most important to us and what lights us up and what really is our true heart's desires, is the conversation that when we have it as women begins to shift everything for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I there's some similar threads in what you've described and where I am in this moment. And if you'll humor me, I'm gonna read. I wrote this one thing down. It's on my desk. It's on a post-it from just some sort of intentions and trying to create almost guardrails for myself to
Mm,
touchstones for myself in the year ahead. And um, I wrote that I want to stop feeling the need to conform to traditional norms in how my work is defined or performed. And that's not a new thought for me, but it's the first time I've put it in that language and like
mm.
have it on my desk to remind me that there isn't a singular way to do things and I'm not doing it the wrong way. I may be doing it in an unconventional way, but it's what you just described of finding the way, the method that works for you in this season of life.
Yeah. That's a mic drop right there. She did just really say that. Because I think that, Jen, you've wrapped it up beautifully. Like, it's not about conforming. I think that's where we are all stuck as women. And we're like, I need somebody to coach me or teach me or partner with me from that space. And I think that's where you come in. What came up for me as I was looking at your website, I have it in my background. Thought partner for me, every time I see that, I'm like, but they're more than that. You're more than just a thinking. And what kind of came up as you were just sharing that was a wisdom partner.
Hmm.
Because there's this true wisdom that you have that when partnered or collaborated with women that are in the space of transition coach or building businesses, because that is your background, there's a chance that you get to be a wisdom mentor or a wisdom partner or a wisdom sister or something to that, because that feels like that gives you the opportunity to do both that. Here's a little bit of a framework, But here's something I'm also noticing, which is that blend, right? I think that's where wisdom plays, is it's both within a framework and the possibility.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I love that language. And another thing that comes up a lot that probably isn't on my website, but it's something we talk about in the community is like also wayfinding, right? Like
Mm,
being a wayfinding partner, not just me, but the people that we choose to surround ourselves with to
yeah.
help us find and forge and craft that path for ourselves.
Do you use a lot of words like pathway, forward? There's an innate language you're already using that is very attractive for women because we are forging new paths. We are stepping out of the blueprints and saying, that's great, that's four walls, but what if I put a door here and a window here and I open some light over here and I decide I want to move this around? Like you're really becoming the architect or the designer of your life and not just the conformist in life. So I think what you're starting to discover, and I really look forward to just staying in touch throughout the rest of this year and watching your journey because there is a innate wisdom and innate strength within you. And for any of our listeners, if something Jen said resonated with you and you're like, okay, I want to learn more about who Jen is, her website's going to be in the show notes. The Easy Please Sisterhood is going to be in the show notes. So that's going to be there for you just to connect with her. And if there was another woman that you thought about as you were listening to this, because I know I got a couple women that popped up in the world of caregiving and taking care of spouses, that could listen to this and that would benefit from this conversation, then invite them in, share this with them because that's where connection happens. And when we start sharing out each other's voices as women, we strengthen our collective voice for all that are listening. So for just being here, thank you, Jen, so much. I do have one last question before we wrap up. I know we're at our
Okay.
time. Um, have you had a moment since you've kind of stepped back into this world where this is a bold podcast? Like, did she really say that kind of moment? Now, I captured one earlier, but has there been a moment in your coaching, consulting as a thought leader where you've said or done something and people are, or even in your past career, you've said
Hmm.
or done something and they go, did she really say or do that?
Oh, I'm terrible with these questions.
Hey,
I feel like a deer in headlights. I will think of that after we end our call. I'm sure I
excellent.
will come up with two or three, but I will say this, that I think that I've entered the season where some of it is I am like postmenopausal. Some of it is midlife, menopause, going through hard things. That I was once the person that was the consummate diplomat. Everyone would say, you are a skilled cat herder,
Mm,
just endless patience. And I have lost a lot of that, which is something I've actually mourned. I wish I still had that fortitude to just have the ultimate diplomacy in every moment. But I am grateful for the gifts of midlife in being able to not be unkind, but be much more direct
yeah.
and unafraid of hurting feelings.
Wisdom keeps coming back because that is wisdom defined, looking back and saying, you know what? It's time to be direct with with each other. It's time to have real conversations. It's time to talk about what we're experiencing as women, and that is beautiful. And that's a beautiful. Did she really say
it's
that?
it's a different form of kindness to me, right? Because when we don't say the hard things, the uncomfortable things, then our relationships fester, the resentment set in, and it's just like the long, horrible, ugly goodbye.
Yeah. I will say being the pleaser or the peacekeeper, because I've had that role, really am like a fuck it on that point because it's like there is a place for it and then there is a time to speak up and be direct about something.
Yeah.
And so that is beautiful. For all of our listeners, again, thank you for being here, Jen. It's been an absolute pleasure. Wraps up our episode of Did She Really Say That? So go out, share, and we will see you on our next episode. Bye, everyone. If today's conversation hit home, don't just listen, take the next step. Download the free Create Her Authentically guide at createherplanner.com/free and discover how to build your business in alignment with your natural rhythm. And if you love this episode, please leave a review. It helps more women find the show. I'll see you in the next episode.